Hello all, this is Barbara Mann from Your Empowered You, and welcome to our video of workplace turnover, friend or foe. So in this video, we're going to be talking about why it's important to manage the turnover in an organization. Specifically, we're going to talk about are there acceptable levels of turnover? Is there good turnover? Is there bad turnover? And what does turnover really say about your organization? So before we start, you may hear me talk about employee retention and employee turnover. So employee retention and turnover are the same metrics except just viewed in different perspectives. So an example is if you have an employee retention goal of 85%, that means you want to retain 85% of your work staff. And the converse way of stating that is you have a 15% turnover goal, which means you're going to turn over and lose 15% of your employees. So I'm going to use those terms interchangeably, most often turnover, but if I use retention, that just means what's the percentage of us retaining employees in our organization. So what's an acceptable level of turnover? So every company has some sort of retention or a turnover goal. So it depends on how an organization puts it on their goals and objectives. They'll either put it as a retention goal or a turnover goal or metric. And a lot of times this is tied into the leader's goals and objectives because it is usually a reflection of leaders, whether it's at the organizational level, department level, or team level. So it's often tied to leaders' goals and objectives, so it's something that does need to be managed. And different roles have different metrics. So some departments have historically higher turnover rates than others. So sales departments notoriously have higher turnover rates than, say, an IT type of department. Not that I really know what each of those metrics are. I just know that different departments have different turnover rates. So I managed my operation. I had my own specific turnover rate for my department, so I was held accountable to that. So why should it be even tied to a metric? Because it really tells you about the health of an organization. It tells you about the health of an office, of a team. It helps you pinpoint what's going on with different offices, with different managers. So you may have a manager who has a low turnover rate. Everybody stays in that department. And you may have a manager with very high turnover rate. Well, what's going on? Maybe nothing, but maybe it's something to look into. And the bottom line is that turnover costs the company money. It's no secret that to recruit, to train, to onboard somebody and get them to that proficiency level of someone who's left an organization, it costs the company money. So it costs an organization, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars by the time that they go through the recruiting, the interviewing, the hiring, the training, and the onboarding, get them to that proficiency level. So it costs the company money. That's why we have these kinds of metrics. So is turnover always good? It's not always good and it's not always bad. So turnover can be, I guess, a good thing for both the employee and the organization when you have a situation, obviously, when an employee isn't meeting expectations. Now, how am I going to say that's good for an employee? The bottom line is that not every job is a good fit for an employee. Doesn't mean they're a bad employee, doesn't mean they're a bad person. It means the job isn't the right fit for them. Big deal. There are many jobs out there that are the right fit. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. And the employee, the management can do everything they can to help the employee meet the expectations, but sometimes it's just not the right fit, which will result in turnover. You could have a situation where you could have someone who is meeting expectations, but maybe they're just not engaged and their attitude's really poor and they bring the team down. That may not be a good cultural fit for an organization. And when you have someone who's not a good cultural fit, who is impacting the morale of others, that may be a situation where it may lead to some turnover, and that may not be bad. Sometimes when you have that sort of bad energy kind of person and they leave, and you really see that boost in morale, it could be a good thing for turnover. Turnover is good when you have an employee that does something egregious. Needless to say, if it's something bad and you can't keep somebody like that in your organization, they probably have to go. So you hope that people don't do egregious kinds of actions, but it does happen. So needless to say, that's going to produce some turnover. And that's not necessarily bad. You can't keep that kind of person in an organization. The other thing that's actually good about turnover is that it allows you to bring in personnel, whether it's from outside your company or from other departments, to bring them into your team or your office, and allows for other perspectives, and it really creates opportunities for others. So if everyone stays in their positions, it doesn't really allow for movement and opportunities for others. So it does help create those opportunities, and especially if you have someone who is a higher up employee, maybe they're leaving the organization for a fantastic promotional opportunity or something. Well, it's going to create promotional opportunities for people who are still there. So sometimes that movement, it isn't always bad. It actually is good for others who are still there. So when's it usually perceived as bad turnover? Well, usually it's perceived as bad is when you're a lot higher than your target of your turnover rate. So if you have, I don't know, a turnover rate of 12% and you're at 20, that's not going to be perceived that's going to be probably perceived pretty poorly. And if you have any kind of like mass exodus, that's not going to be perceived well. You have one employee who joins maybe another competitor, and you have 3 or 4 or 5 other people follow the path. Probably not going to be perceived very well, and it's going to be considered bad turnover, and also creates a lot of stress on the people who are still there. And then it starts them thinking, should I be joining them? Should I stay? Am I making the right decision? So it's obviously going to be perceived as bad if you have that mass exodus. When you lose a high performer to a competitor, now is that considered bad or is that considered good? It really, to me, depends on the situation. So if you lose a high performer to a competitor who, say, it's a fantastic promotional opportunity. Now, if your organization doesn't allow or doesn't have some sort of promotional opportunity, it's probably a good thing. You want the best for people who are doing well. And if your company doesn't offer some fabulous promotional opportunity and they have it at another company, that's probably a good thing for that person, for that employee. So that wouldn't be perceived to me as bad. That's good. You train this person. They're a great performer. Another organization can provide them to the next level with top talent. It's good turnover. Now, it's not good turnover for a high performer if they're going to that competitor for an equal or lower type of position. That is telling you something. Now, some people may say, well, it may be because the salary's higher. And that's true. People sometimes leave for salary, but most of the time they actually don't. They're leaving for other reasons. So if a high performer is leaving because of and taking an equal or lower type of position, that's something's going on. That's something going on. And then finally, you can find out, what if it's perceived as bad or good on the exit interview. Is it indicating there's some cultural issues going on in the organization? Is it indicating something going on with the manager, with the team, with the office, with the organization? There's something cultural going on that may not be a good thing. It's great feedback to get those sorts of that information off of exit interviews. So it can be sometimes good, and it can sometimes be perceived as bad. So what does high turnover or bad, I guess, however we want to call it, bad turnover, high turnover, say about your team, department, or organization? Well, I'm sure we've all heard the term that people don't necessarily leave their company, they leave their manager. So oftentimes, and not all the time, this isn't always true, but oftentimes it's a reflection on the manager or the management. There's something going on that an employee may not like about either their direct report or maybe the upper type of management. Maybe there's micromanagement going on. Maybe there's poor communication between manager and their employee and their staff. Maybe there's perceptions that the management has favorites. There's all kinds of things that go into what is really going on with the manager and the teams. So, it's extremely important to find out what the root cause is about turnover. Whether it's one person to 10 people, but especially if you have high turnover, that's really telling you something. You could have issues, say, with culture. So maybe employees kind of look around and they don't see a lot of promotions from within. Maybe they're seeing people who continue to get hired from the outside. I can tell you that is usually not good when you continually see people hired from the outside and you lack promotions from within. Maybe employees see a lack of sort of engagement initiatives, volunteer opportunities or employee resource groups or, other things to really get involved just outside their normal jobs within the organization. It could also be such as tuition reimbursement opportunities, things like that. They could be looking at, maybe they see there's a lack of diversity in certain roles, whether it's a race or gender. Maybe they're seeing a lack of diversity. And that, again, these are just things that I've seen in my career what tends to come up when you have a lot of turnover. Maybe employees see a lack of development opportunities. They're just doing what they're doing in their jobs, and they don't see themselves or other employees being developed into other types of positions or other departments. So it's important to take note and to keep the pulse on, what are your employees thinking, because you don't want it to turn out that they're going to leave your organization and something that you could have done. But maybe the turnover is as a result of poor training, and poor onboarding. Maybe the employee feels that, hey, I just got thrown to the wolves and I was told I was going to be trained. I was only trained for a week and then I'm thrown to the wolves and I'm struggling here. It's really important to have a comprehensive training and onboarding program and not someone not feeling like they're thrown to the wolves and they're just sinking. That will create turnover. Maybe within the 3 months, it could be within 6 months, it could be within a year, but make sure that the training is adequate to make someone feel supported. Another reason why there could be high turnover is unclear expectations. So needless to say, everybody wants to know what is expected of them. And when people don't know what is expected of them and it's unclear, kind of creates that sort of anxiety, and especially if they're unclear on what's expected of them, but then during a performance review, if they're not meeting something and there's just this cloudiness and confusion going on. It is really important to make sure that the expectations of every employee is extremely clear and that there is regular meetings and communication on where people stand. That helps avoid the unclear expectation. So people want to know how they're doing and where they stand, whether it is something they need to improve upon or whether they're doing great. Just being open and honest and transparent is important for employees. So let's wrap this up in the bow and talk about just some of the key points we've chatted about. Retention and employee turnover, it is measured. It should be measured. It's important to organizations. It's a reflection on the health of the organization. It can help identify issues very, very quickly. Turnover is costly, both monetarily, costs the company money to recruit, to interview, to train, to onboard, and culturally it's costly. So if you have a lot of turnover, that's going to affect your culture. It's going to get people thinking, like, what's wrong with this organization? You're going to start bringing in people who come from have different workplace cultures. So it puts a strain on the workplace culture as well. So it's costly in that manner as well. With that said, you're always going to have turnover. It is not always bad. We've talked about how it can be good. We've talked about how it's going to be perceived as bad. So It really depends on your situation, but if it's managed appropriately, turnover can actually enhance and grow your organization. It can bring in new perspectives. It can create development opportunities for others. There's things that it can do that can be positive. It just needs to be managed appropriately and identify any kinds of trends on exit interviews or feedback that an organization is receiving. That if you act on those sorts of things and really keep improving upon the root issues for turnover, you are going to then have the healthy sort of turnover and create other opportunities for the folks who are in the organization. So I hope you've enjoyed our video on workplace retention, friend or foe. It's basically sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. It really depends on the situation. For additional resources or to schedule a session with me, please visit my website at www.yourimpoweredyou.com. You can email me at bman@yourimpoweredyou.com or feel free to give me a call at 916-633-2555. And I thank you very much and have a very empowered day.